Nathan in Scotland. You're talking to Eric and Jamie. How are you doing?
Oh, wow. This is actually real. How are you?
What's up, brother?
Hey, it's for real.
It is real.
Mhm.
Okay, so I wanted to talk to you both about consciousness and whether or not it relates to a material reality. Like
Okay.
materialism stuff. Yeah. Is that okay?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, cool beans. So I think an argument that I more or less wanted to make was that consciousness is essentially immaterial. So the argument would probably go along the following lines.
Sure.
You'd say something like, well, a fundamental feature about consciousness is that there's this subjective first-person experience, but you cannot infer that these subjective first-person experiences are going on if you were to just analyze descriptive facts alone.
Okay.
So particles colliding, different fields firing within the brain, et cetera, et cetera.
Why not?
So why not? That's a really good question. Right. So I think that the reason that would be the case is because, as Colin McGinn argues, that consciousness is something that's essentially non-spatial.
How so?
We could look
Because we can
yeah.
test the brain and we can test all of the different pieces that we relate to consciousness and alter those through physical means, which means either your consciousness is something that equates to nothing because we can trace consciousness in the brain as a brain state. What is non-physical about it? That would be like me holding up this coffee mug and saying, this coffee mug can't just be physical. Otherwise, it's just a coffee mug made of stuff. You know?
Yeah.
So what's the difference? I don't understand why appealing to the fact that it's just stuff means that it's any more true or less true.
Right. That's a good point. I think that a pretty good analogy that you can maybe draw is to talk about a musical score, for instance. So a musical score could only exist on a physical object. So it could only exist like as sheet music or a computer file or like something that's encoded within the brain of a musician. Yeah.
But the concept of a piece of music is something that we define based on those things. So if you're talking about this idea that humans have of consciousness as far as what it describes in the physical world, then yes, that idea exists as an idea.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I think, though, it would be a mistake to conclude that, therefore, the music itself was therefore identical with any of those objects. So the score is, in essence, like some type of code that needs to be inscribed somewhere in order to exist. But that code and not the somewhere is what makes it what it is. So it's sort of taking this like functional.
So I kind of disagree with that, actually.
Is that the genetic fallacy?
Well, it's the thinking that the human definition of a concept that is amorphous, like consciousness or a piece of music, necessarily equates to a thing that exists that is amorphous. So no, we define a thing as a piece of music, right? And that can be referred to as things inscribed on a piece of paper that correlate to what we also call notes, which are particular pieces of sound that are that. But the thing that would, quote, make it a piece of music is because that's what we call that thing.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So it doesn't exist outside of those physical things and the way we think about it.
Yeah, so this is the interesting part. I'm glad that you brought that point up. It's a good point.
Okay, thank you.
Is to say, always try to be civil, right? And so I think what that is kind of getting at is to say that it's causally reducible, right? So we could say that, okay, well, what's causing the sound? Okay, well, the sheet music, the interaction between the sheet music and the brain and the body. But then the question is, what is the ontology of the music? So what is the nature of the music's existence? And so it seems that we could do a causal reduction, and we could say we could reduce the cause of the music to
absolutely.
Something.
Absolutely.
But the ontology
division.
Of the music,
that's the fallacy of division.
Does that make sense?
No. Well, so I understand why it makes sense to you.
Okay.
Yeah, no worries. So do you think something that can something can happen that somebody didn't want, right? Do you think you could wake up and go to brush your teeth and realize that you're out of toothpaste?
Yeah, that can happen. Yeah, sure.
Okay, so what's the ontology of you being out of toothpaste, right? What's the if you go down, well, let's look at a creation, not an accident, right? Somebody creates a score of music, right? Mm-hmm. Why does there have to be any more to it than somebody created a score of music?
Right, that's a good question. I think that why does there have to be anything more to it? So the question is to say, what is the nature of that thing's existence? So things exist and they're uncontroversial in their natural existence, right? Like I have a cup on my desk. We all know that the cup exists because we could touch it. It's tactile. It exists within space.
We've got that.
Et cetera, et cetera.
We're not presuppositional apologists. We promise.
Yeah, not a presuppositional. Right. No, I'm an agnostic, right? Yay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yay. You're pretty much there.
Yeah. I know, right? So I think, though, that then what you can then say is you could say, okay, well, there are certain things, consciousness being one of them, and, like pain and whatnot. And those things have this ontological first-person subjective experience. And they exist, and we can't help but notice that they exist. And, in the way that Descartes said, I think, therefore I am, cogito ergo sum, right? You have to acknowledge the existence.
Nathan, you're starting to sound really robotic.
So run that by me one more time, because it kind of sounded like you said a thing that exists has an a subjective experience. I'm going to assume that you don't mean that the piece of music has a subjective, like it isn't.
No. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
wanted to check here, because this was going to be a very different conversation.
I mean, I don't understand where we would get off with Descartes. Cogito ergo sum. I only agree in that you can verify that you are a thinking mind, but why would you think that thinking mind is anything other than physical?
Yeah, I think that the mind causally depends, or the mind depends on the brain, but I don't necessarily think that the mind is identical.
Give me one quality of a mind that is not dependent on a brain.
One quality of the mind that's not dependent on the brain.
Yeah, you said pain. There are people who experience brain injuries and are never able to experience pain.
Yeah. So
right. There are people who've lost the frontal lobe due to lobotomy and lose personality. We can pinpoint everything. Yeah. So what possibly is there that you're thinking doesn't exist physically?
I love that question. So what I would say is that that's really good evidence that the mind does depend on the brain, because whenever we alter the brain, we alter the mind.
Okay,
right?
I agree.
Wouldn't it be a shorter leap to say that the mind is the brain or the brain state?
That's the problem. Okay, so this is the part where we get to a fun thought experiment. Is the mind the brain? The problem with that is that if I say, well, the mind is just identical to the brain, that means if there exists some brain state, then that brain state or that mind state is identical with the brain state. So pain is just a firing of C fibers, right? It's a bunch of neural.
Hold on. So why do you keep saying just?
Okay. Yeah. I'll make it sound more compelling. Sorry, I apologize. Pain is a firing of C fibers. It's a bunch of neurological goings on that happen within the body whenever a stimulus is applied to that agent.
Okay.
Now the problem is if we say, okay, pain is just a firing of C fibers.
You said just again.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, I apologize. If pain is a firing of C fibers, then if you don't have C fibers, then you can't have pain.
That seems logical to me.
I don't know.
That's the problem.
I don't know enough about the biology of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, again, the neurological, this is just a classic thought experiment. Sure. So the point is that if we were to come across Martians, and Martians just, aliens or whatever, and they were writhing and they were like, I'm in pain. And then we said, well, you're not in pain because you don't have C fibers.
Okay.
So I don't think that anyone is saying it is impossible for some other kind of brain to produce a mind state inherently.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So do you think that a mind state, like the thought that, oh my gosh, we're coming up on the end of the show and we've got a bunch more calls, could exist in absent something that is functioning as the brain for that mind state?
I don't think that's the case. I think that the mind needs to be embodied. So I don't think that immaterial souls, I don't believe in souls. I don't believe in property dualism. I don't think that there's this like extra supernatural stuff that's squirted out by the brain. That's not me.
Then what is immaterial to you? What is your
Yeah.
definition of immaterial? Because it sounds like you just said, I don't believe it,
But
and
it's
I
true.
believe it.
Yeah. Do you believe that the mind is an immaterial thing?
Right. Yeah, you're hitting on this. You're hitting on this thing. I think that the mind is, God, I don't want to use the word emergence, but
I do. The mind is an emergent property. Consciousness is an emergent property of having a brain. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I more or less agree with that position. I think that the lower level microphysical phenomenon that exist within the brain produce the mind in some causal function. That they're not two separate events that are occurring. It's not like physical stuff and then mental stuff all of a sudden appears. That the physical stuff is in some sense what the mental stuff is. But what I take issue with sometimes is saying that the mind is identical with the brain. I think that the brain could cause mind-like stuff, and that maybe a computer can cause mind-like stuff. But I think that this mind thing should in some sense be separated from brain things so we could study it more scientifically, if that makes sense.
When
Yeah,
you say
and
separated, you mean thought of separately?
Yes.
Okay.
I should have, yeah.
Yeah,
It has been psychology versus neuroscience, but
Yeah,
sorry.
I mean, I'm looking at a computer right now, and there's a program running on the computer, right? So is the program identical to the computer? Well, the computer is running the program. So without the computer, the program's not going to run, right?
Exactly.
Because it has nothing to be on. In the same way, there are ideas that we communicate with each other and are able to express to one another the idea of discrete numbers, right? I can teach you what the number 1 is and what it means and how to use it in mathematics. That doesn't mean that the number 1 is existent outside of our concept that we're sharing with each other, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
so if that's the case, we have completely done this within the confines of a purely physical universe. Why is there, what is immaterial about that?
I think that what's immaterial about it, and this is the part where I depart a little bit from Daniel Dennett, and no notifications. And I depart from a little bit from Daniel Dennett. I agree more with John Searle, is to say that yes, there is this causal reduction that you could do with consciousness. You could point to the lateral geniculate nucleus. You could point to the V1 visual area. And you could say that's where the seeing is going on. But then that can't do an ontological reduction. You can't say, therefore, there's like first-person subjective experience that you're having is therefore illusory or it's an illusion. They do the same thing with rainbows, right? Like there is no arc in the sky. It's just a bunch of water molecules acting in a particular way. There really is no arch that you could go there and touch. I don't think you could do the same thing with consciousness. So there could be a causal reduction, but not an ontological reduction.
Why?
I don't think an ontological reduction is necessary.
Yeah. And so the position that Searle advocated for that I sort of agree with this whole biological naturalism, which concedes that everything that's going on with the mind is fundamentally natural. There's no supernaturalism going on, but that we should focus on the fact that biology is producing it, and and we should just not import dualism. So
I'm going to go back and look at this and see if I can figure out and tease out a little bit more, because I don't feel like I'm on the same page as you in kind of understanding with this argument. But I think that I may come to agree with you. I just need to kind of look into it. Yeah. So give me some time to research, and I'd love to better my understanding of the world.
Yeah,
and I appreciate you calling.
Yeah, I was going to say jump into the Discord or the Reddit.
Yeah.
We'll be there.
For sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for taking my call. You guys have been fun to talk to.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. You too.
All right. See you. Bye.
Yeah. Working together.
That was good.
J and E.
Yep.
All right.